Hello, everybody. It's my great pleasure to have Wade Caves as a guest. Wade is an expert, even though he doesn't like that word, in Horaria astrology. He's been a teacher of mine for a long time. And today we're going to be speaking about a very funny thing that's going on in the sky right now, and is Mars is applying to Venus instead of the other way around. And Mars, which is the slower planet of the two, is translating the light from Jupiter to Venus. So that is quite unusual, and I would love to hear Wade and his opinions on this topic. Hello, Wade. How are you?
Hello. Yeah. It's thank you for having me. This has been kind of a surprise, but it's nice. It's a good way to spend a Monday. So,
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course. So I guess we've kind of got an unusual situation happening in the sky right now. Maybe to give a little bit of a context for folks who are not aware, all the planets will travel at their different speeds. The sun travels roughly 1 degree per day, very steady. It doesn't get much slower or much faster than that. The moon is much faster, can go up to 15 degrees a day or as slow as 11 degrees a day. So there's a bit of a window, and you can see quite a bit of change that happens there. So roughly, the moon will spend, somewhere around 12 to 13 degrees a day though. Venus on average it usually moves a little over 1 degree a day. Mars will typically move about 0.5 degree a day. So we see all these planets moving at their own speeds, at their own pace, and it's all, of course, related to how close they are to the Earth, because it's all visual phenomena that we have, right? Like the further that they get away from our line of sight, the slower that they end up being from our perspective. And motion's everything for us as astrologers. Motion tells us so much. When we see these planets coming together, they form these shapes in the sky, which we call aspects. And we will say, for instance, that the trine is a 120-degree aspect, but really the trine is a triangle. The real core part that's being said here is that we are inscribing shapes in the sky. And yes, we measure it by saying it's 120 degrees apart, but the important part is that the shape has been made. That's what really matters. But to make a shape, planets have to move. They have to move into position. They've got to come into position and fall out of position. So we go, for instance, from the conjunction to the sextile to the square to the trine to the opposition, if we're just painting a typical path on one side. So yep, planets will move into this, planets will move out. And for us, motion is everything, because motion will tell us intention, it will tell us motivation. It says a lot.
Yes, yeah. The ability of the planet to act, because if a planet is slow, it loses efficiency, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you imagined yourself while the current of life is all moving around you, and then if you are still like a stationary planet. So Venus is still just coming out of a stationary position. So she appears, that word stationary, it's like she's stationed still. She's not really moving. Her movement is hardly visible. And so it kind of creates this image where all of the current of life is moving, but she is this fixed point. Now, there are probably circumstances where that can be very useful. Maybe, in the resolution of crisis, somebody being able to stand and weather a storm. But usually, that's not what's depicted. You want to be able to see somebody actually being able to move, bend, and adapt with what's going on. So if you're stationing, moving retrograde, that usually is an indication of the beginning of future troubles. But then as we station moving forward, it's almost like the dust has begun to settle and we can start to see things move forward. Now, as one planet approaches another, a couple things come into the picture for us. I mean, if we've got, say, planet A and planet B, and planet A is applying to planet B, what that says is planet A wants to create that connection. It has an interest in being able to establish a dynamic with this other planet. And the shape it makes in the sky, because we say aspect, we're talking about just general aspects, but it's the shape that's inscribed by the aspect that they make, the measurement that they make. That tells us the nature of the approach. So, if the moving planet is forming by sextile or trine, or maybe by conjunction,
they're looking for a smooth,
right? It's a gentle approach. Even better if you're coming to me from one of my signs, because now you're behaving like things that I appreciate. I'm I'm not great with small talk. That's not my thing. And I appreciate in certain circumstances, if we need to like get a list of everything, let's get the list and let's knock it out. So I always joke, because I got some members in my family, when they want to tell you something that needs doing, they want to couch it in 20 different stories before they get to the point. And, and that's one approach. And some people in the family love that. But for me, I say, tell me what you want first, then let's do story time.
That would be a conjunction, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. So we can appreciate different forms of approach, but the point is the one applying is the one that is showing interest in making that connection happen. Now, it normally is the case that the faster moving planets, quote unquote, on average, are the ones that are applying. So we would say, for instance, if you look in the works of Al-Kindi, I believe is who I'm about to quote, he would make the point that the moon applies to all planets. She's the fastest moving planet. She applies to Mercury, Venus, all the way through to Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Mercury is not said to apply to the moon. Exactly. Right, because Mercury is faster than the moon. There is an exception, of course, and this is when retrograde. Mercury is retrograde, exactly. And there's no exception for the moon because she never moves backward. So the moon is always the one who is kind of pushing things forward. It's part of her character, part of her psychology, and part of the way that she works, that she is forever pressing forward, just like the sun. I think it's powerful that the two luminaries can never retrogress, and what that says about the nature of ever advancing civilization, if this is what we would like to see happen, but the idea of life moving forward, always trying to find a way. But the other planets, they can station and they can move backwards. And so we have unique situations where 9 times out of 10, maybe more, probably, Venus is the one that's applying to Mars. It's usually Venus, the one that is approaching Mars. Now that is interesting because if you think about the Venus, I mean, it's fairly standard. Venus is a planet that doesn't like confrontation, like things to be soft, likes things to be enjoyable, if that can also be accomplished. Everybody should smile as a result of the work that she's doing. I mean, that's the general idea. But when you apply to Mars, Mars is a very different type of energy. So Venus making an application to Mars, depending on the context, that could be about a relationship, but it could also be about securing a loan. Imagine a situation where Libra is rising and Scorpio is on the second cusp, and you can see that the Venus person wants the loan. But the issue is, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Or they want some money. I mean, maybe with loans, we should be talking about the whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you've got this situation now where we're applying to Mars, the ancients would say that the malefics, we need to see reception, because the applying planet wants the connection to happen, right? We know this because they're moving towards it. It's like if I pick up the phone to call you, Maria, of course I want to talk to you because I have dialed your number. I have made this happen. But what we need is you to see the caller ID and decide to pick up. You know what I mean? So there needs to be this agreement on the other side. So the malefics are said that, with Mars and Saturn, they're a bit self-serving. They're very focused on their own interests. And as a result, we find that they're less likely to do what we want them to do unless they're goaded into action in some way. So the best way to see that is to be in one of their signs. So if I was approaching Mars from Capricorn, that's a nice scenario because I'm approaching Mars with an attitude, a disposition, and from an environment that puts Mars in touch with things that lift him up. It's his strength. It's his,
I remember Lee Lemon commenting that it's like approaching Saturn or Mars, wearing the T-shirt of the what do you call this, I don't remember how to say it in English. I'm sorry. Wearing the T-shirt of the football team that Saturn likes. Okay.
Yes, exactly. I just had that in my head. I remember when I went to go.
They're gonna say, "Oh, this guy, I'm gonna listen to this guy because he's coming from a place that I can relate to."
Yes,
and I
exactly. I 100%. You're reminding me of this time that I was in Luxembourg with some friends, and we went to a bar to go watch a game that Portugal was playing. And before I went in, my friend said, "Before you go in this bar," and they gave me a scarf that was Portugal, a shirt that was Portugal. They said, "Listen, you've got to be clear who you are when you walk in," and that's exactly, and that's what it's all about. So with malefics, we like to see some form of reception because it creates a good dynamic between the two. But the thing is, to receive, somebody's got to be applying to you. And, you know, the situation that we have right now is not the normal one between Venus and Mars, because normally Venus would be applying to Mars and then Mars can receive. They're both in Capricorn right now. But the fact is that because Venus is moving so slowly, I just looked at my software to see if I could pull up the actual
Very, very
speed.
slowly. And also, I think it's confusing that an astrologer can look at that chart and think Venus can only apply to Mars if it's retrograde. And this is not the case. So that is also confusing. Always take into account the speed of the planets.
That's absolutely right. So right now, Venus is moving 20 minutes per day. So normally she moves about a degree in 20 minutes, you know, somewhere up there. Definitely over a degree. And Venus right now is only moving 20 minutes a day, but Mars is moving 44 minutes per day. So Mars is twice as fast as Venus. And that's why what's coming up next is Venus is going to be overtaken by Mars by conjunction. Now, this is a different situation. Venus isn't applying to Mars now. Mars is applying to Venus. There is not reception in this. And I think that's probably helpful for people to remember, because Venus would need to receive Mars, because you have to be the applied to planet to receive. And unless we are also talking about the conjunction happening in Venus's terms, then we have triplicity at the right time of day, if it's a daytime chart, and maybe the terms or face, you know, some other kind of configuration. There isn't going to be reception on the other end of that. However, you know, if you can imagine being Venus asking Mars to cooperate with something would be a lot harder work than Mars asking Venus to cooperate with something, especially while Mars is exalted in its own sign and able to direct.
Yeah. Do you think it's like a sort of imposition?
It is. I think it can be. It can be. I mean, I've seen actually recently on the STA Grads Forum, there's been conversation about relationships that have fallen on the back of this dance that Venus and Mars have been doing. And there does feel to be a bit of an imposition coming from the charts that I've seen about people wanting to bring a dead relationship back to life. And maybe a dead relationship is too harsh of a way to phrase it.
I know.
But yeah, something that has ended, and now the Mars person wants it back, you know, and you can absolutely see the desire to push that narrative with that kind of conjunction. And what will happen is Mars will pass over Venus, while Venus is still moving very, very slowly. So it almost gives this impression of, you know, the Venus person on the back foot, getting passed by with this opportunity, but not really personally motivated to, you know, move with that at first. But as Venus starts to pick up speed, because their conjunction, I think, is at like 16 or 17 Capricorn. That's where Mars will conjoin Venus. And then Mars moves on. But Venus is now then going to start picking up speed, and there will be another conjunction, which happens at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now, I'm interested in that conjunction, Maria, because that's the same degree that Saturn and Jupiter conjoined in back in December 2020. So there's something to be said about, and that, if I remember correctly, I don't know if I've got it open in front of me. If I remember, give me half a second. I'm just going to look at something quickly. I just want to see, is it in, there we go. So Saturn in Ukraine's independence chart. So if we're talking about like global politics, Saturn was at 1 degree of Aquarius in their chart, and Saturn rules the ascendant, and it disposits a good number of the planets in that chart. Saturn-Jupiter conjunction happened there. The Venus-Mars conjunctions happening there. You know, so it's kind of kicking up. This is an interesting thing to see all the different ways that these things are kind of pulling these together. But now when we get the Venus-Mars conjunction, we're out of Capricorn. If this had happened at 29 Capricorn, Mars could have received Venus, but it's going to happen in the first bit of Aquarius where Mars doesn't have dignity. And so the reception that looked like it was all but guaranteed will fall apart by the time that we move into the next sign.
Oh, that's not very good news for this situation, because Mars triggers events. And
Mars does trigger events.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
It will be out of dignity. So that's not, that doesn't sound very.
Well, it's definitely going to be intense. And if I remember correctly, I think at the same time, right around the same time, there's also a Sun-Jupiter conjunction that's happening in Pisces. So, and that's gonna, you know, I mean, that's gonna happen, I think, at 15 or 16 degrees of Pisces, 16, I believe. So that's gonna be an interesting thing to watch too. I mean, I live in New York City. So last year around this time, once we get to like March, April, May, even June, we were having so many floods here in New York. And I'm kind of thinking that these successive conjunctions in Pisces are probably going to expose some vulnerabilities that we've got internationally to things related to flooding or things related to water control or flood barrier. But in a horary chart, you know, that's a mundane kind of situation. From a horary perspective, this dance between Venus and Mars, it kind of describes a continual back and forth between two people, where at the first union, they almost get a little bit of what they both want, but it felt like Mars was telling Venus what to do. At which point then Venus catches up and thinks, well, maybe I can put what I want on the plate. We're both in Capricorn. Mars will receive me. You know, I just need to put my issues down. But of course, the conjunction happens as they both are stepping into a completely new environment and the dynamic fully changes. So, you know, whether that's a career situation, financial situation, relationship situation, the signature of moving into the winter sign, the Saturn sign, the ice field, you know, it's there. And Mars, it doesn't spend a lot of time in Aquarius either. So, you know, I always find conjunctions with Mars and Aquarius to be almost like finding Mars, you know, in kind of rare form, you know, it's a little bit different.
This is fascinating. And I've noticed also that when Mars approaching Venus, Mars will be translating the light from Jupiter to Venus.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that is a new one for me also, because generally it's the faster planet that translates, but in this case we have a different kind of translation.
And it's important also just to remember that the definition of translation is just separating from one planet while applying to the next. So actually Saturn can translate if the configurations are off. I mean, it's not his normal job. So it would be weird if Saturn did. And I can guarantee you it would be that situation where Saturn's the one translating would be characterized with awkwardness and stumbling around. It would still carry the Saturn signal. It has to. Saturn is the one doing the translation, so it's got to feel like a bit of a Saturn kind of play. But in this case, it's Mars, and Mars is exalted. So I think that this is kind of so just for the folks watching, Mars and Jupiter were in sextile, I believe, at 6 degrees of their respective signs. So Mars was in Capricorn, Jupiter is in Pisces. Venus was retrograding back, but stationed before she perfected the sextile with Jupiter. So if it had happened, for instance, that maybe we had, you know, Libra on the ascendant, and then maybe this is about a property transaction, and maybe we've got Sagittarius on the 4th house cusp, that might be a moment of all hopes just falling apart. But now we have, right, because we stationed before the aspect becomes exact. Because then this is why motion is everything. It's because we need the union to come together, otherwise things fall apart. But in this case, somebody is in perfect position to kind of interpose themselves a little bit and constructively connect the chain of events. So, you know, if you're not familiar with the idea of translation, I just kind of remember back when I was in my 3rd or 4th year of schooling and I wanted to pass a note to somebody on the other side of the classroom, and I would write them. I couldn't reach them, I couldn't get there, but I could pass the note to somebody else who could. And then the whole thing, there is still the business. There's still the business of whether or not, like, did I pass the note to the class clown who's probably going to get caught? You know, so that might be a good example of Mercury retrograde in Pisces trying to translate that it doesn't do the job because it's a bit funny. Or maybe I passed it to the really quiet student in the back who's, you know, just really good about helping people out when she can. And maybe that's just a nice, you know, Venus in Libra or even Venus in Virgo type individual is just quiet, not really assuming much for themselves and just helping. So I think it's important to remember the planet that's translating. But what's great about this is that this Mars, it now facilitates the opportunity for Venus and Jupiter to come together. I'm hopeful that in, you know, where we see, you know, global politics and a lot of tensions, that can be used constructively. But in interpersonal conflicts too, of course, it can do the same thing. And if you know, want to figure out, well, who or what is this interposing party, you know, you just take a look at what house Mars rules and what house it's in to understand. So Lily would say, for instance, that if the moon was separating from one planet and applying to the other, and these two were not in contact with each other, so they needed the moon. And if the moon ruled the 2nd house, what he would have judged is a little money under the table will get this thing moving, you know, or if it had ruled the 3rd, a note, there needs to be a phone call, communicate. Well, Lily wouldn't have said phone call. He wouldn't have said fax, and he wouldn't have said email.
But nephew, ask your neighbor to do the job.
Neighbor, brother, a letter, an emissary, some information that you have would be useful. Because that's the other thing, when the moon is involved, you always have to keep in the back of your mind that the moon is an informant, and so if there's some role that information can play, and if she's in the third house or ruling it, I mean, I have chart after chart where I wasn't clever enough to judge that. And later when I learned what happened and they told me, oh yes, this information passed hands and suddenly everything unlocked. I thought,
Oh,
I'm
I
such an
didn't
idiot.
realize that. Is that because the moon it has its joy in the third? I
Well,
didn't
that's
realize.
why the moon has its joy in the third, is because of her role as the internuncio between planets. She facilitates connections when they can't connect to each other.
Okay.
She's the fastest moving. So I know we give Mercury a lot of credit for being the god of the underworld, and he does this. But for me, Mercury is responsible for creating the pathways and the railways and the funnels through which the moon can walk and deliver the message.
Wow.
So Mercury rules communication too, but it's almost like he's managing the infrastructure and the fact that a connection between 2 points can exist. That's a Mercury thing, that there is a tunnel connecting to these 2 points of experience, but it still takes a traveler to make it real. And that's the moon.
Oh, okay. That's new to me. That's very, very interesting. I'll think about that. Good. That's a wonderful point. Okay, then. Well, this was wonderful, Wade. You're just, I mean, you know so much.
Like I talked a little bit too fast, but I mean,
How
I guess.
long have you been doing horary? How long? Because you're so young. How long have you been doing horary?
I don't think I get to be told I'm so young anymore. I'm getting there to the stage where I'm just a full adult now.
Yes,
but
you are. Are you over 30?
True. I am. I'm 34 now. I used to love when people would say you're so young, and it was like it always felt so good. But now when people say it to me, I go, "Am I anymore?" I don't know, because all the kids anymore. I go on Twitter and they're all 18, 19, 20. I'm like, it's not me anymore.
Anyway, you'll always be 20 years younger than me. So to me, you will always be young. And
well, but I started studying horary in 2013. So I went to London to take the STA program, and I did it over a 2-weekend kind of, which was a lot. It was an intensive, we just kind of sat in classrooms for 8 hours for 5 days to take all that information in. And now we teach it online over 20 weeks. It's a little bit more digestible. It's a little easier.
The best program in the whole world.
Well, Maria, you've always been such a good friend of the school. Yeah, it's been so great to work with you too.
I took the horary course 3 times. I just love it. And I think it's better to do it online than yes.
We've really expanded the syllabus. We've given like new exercises, workbook activities, and we've really developed this, kind of graduation community. So we've got these places where our graduates are able to contribute and work together. And so I'm very happy about the direction that the school is taking. But how about you? When did you start with horary? I don't know if I've ever...
I started with astrology in 1987.
Okay.
Yeah, and I started with horary in 2017. It's going to be 5 years at the beginning. In
2017, that's insane, because I mean, I've seen your work. It's exceptional. I thought that you'd been studying for a lot longer.
Oh, no. I'm new to horary, but I'm obsessed,
Yeah, well, you're very good at it. So
it's my obsession. I tend to get obsessed with astrology and
me too. Well, this is what it does to us. It kind of just sucks us in and then we can't get away. I remember when I later realized that I've got both of my luminaries in very close aspect within 3 degrees to Pluto. My moon and Pluto are exactly sextile. And then I've got a sun Pluto square. And I just realized this is my obsessive characteristic. It's that, because it's not just that, Maria, it's cooking. Whatever I'm into it for a couple of weeks, but astrology has never let me go,
And you have the sun in a fixed sign.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So that's also part of that.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you get good at something when you're obsessed with that thing.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like your undivided attention. Astrology gets my undivided attention. It's like,
I'm just noticing your graduation certificates behind you as well. I don't think that I'd actually seen that. Yes.
Yeah, I still need to finish that. What is it? Not the maestro.
The master's program.
Yes, that one.
Yes,
that one.
but you. I mean, of the students that I'm teaching, you're the furthest along. So don't worry, you're doing really good.
I need some time to sit down and do that.
Yeah.
Well, this was great. I'm so grateful to you, and I'm sure my followers will be super excited about this. Thanks,
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very grateful.
Bye-bye.